A Catholic priest, depicted here on the screen, Father Jesusmary Missigbètò, has accused Pope Francis of, count them up, 10 heresies. Now, I've spoken about Father Jesusmary Missigbètò a couple of times here on the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast. He was suspended in 2021 for his criticism of Pope Francis regarding unnatural unions and the permissibility of civil unions for such couples. That happened, I believe, his criticism was in 2020. And Pope Francis, did he engage him in dialogue? Did he accompany him? Did he say, let's sit down in a safe environment of mercy? No. Father Jesusmary was suspended. And Father Jesusmary has issued today an open letter to Pope Francis Bergoglio, and I'm going to go through it today with you, in which he accuses Francis of at least 10 heresies. So I'm going to guide you through that. What's interesting about what Father Jesusmary has done here is he has documented everything with dates of the errors that he identifies in Francis Bergoglio's statements in theology, and citations, and Bible verses or references to, for example, St. Thomas Aquinas and the Summa Theologiae, countering the teaching, the magisterium of Pope Francis. This is part of the buildup to the October Synod, in which it is rumored, in which it is speculated that he will make moves using the topic of synodality to do what the German church is already doing, which is having functioning women deacons, deaconettes, as we call them here on the podcast, unions, blessings for unnatural vices, for couples involved in non-sacramental matrimonial relationships. And Father Jesusmary has just stacked them up today for at least 10. So please join me in this journey. All I'm doing is taking the accusations, the words of Father Jesusmary, who's from the Ivory Coast, and sharing them with you today. Before we get started, please give this show a thumbs up, give it a like. We're streaming today on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So howdy to all those watching. I'm in a different place today. I'm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Beautiful place. And let's get into it. So this is Father Jesusmary Missigbètò, who has been suspended from the priesthood by Francis Bergoglio. And here he goes. I'm going to skip the introduction and go right into the meat of it. Okay, here's Father Jesusmary. Quote, in reality, since 2016, various errors have appeared in the official teaching of the Church and have created a crisis of confidence of the Catholic faithful in you, because to truly love God and their neighbor, their hearts need the truth as the light of intelligence and prayers as the nourishment of the soul. Pause. This very much mirrors my own life as a Catholic layman. From 2013 to 2016, I tried to square the circle. And as you know, I was like, well, I was one of the Pope's plainers. Well, Pope Francis said this, but in the Spanish, it could mean this. Or in a certain context, it could mean this. And it was in 2016, and especially in 2017, that I stopped doing that. And people thought I was a bad boy. I was schismatic. I was evil. But let's be honest, 2016 was a breaking year for many Catholics. Why? Amoris Laetitia came out, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. So Father Jesusmary says to go on and say, are you aware of your errors, says Father. If the answer is no, is there not a lack of humility on your part in listening to the filial correction of many sons of the Church, bishops, priests, university professors, and experts in theology and morality? And here he cites Galatians chapter 2, St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologiae, part 2 of 2, question 33, article 4, who have drawn your attention to these errors. And then he cites the list and the signatories of people who have brought these errors, these concerns, these dubia to Francis Bergoglio. Then he says, this is Father Jesusmary, if the answer is yes, why do you refuse to correct errors that urgently need to be corrected to prevent the Catholic faithful from committing seriously immoral acts? With this letter, Father Jesusmary says, with this letter, I am not calling on Christian people to rise up, but on the Christian Pope to rise up to humility. Now, Father Jesusmary lists the accusations, the grievances. And this is important. I was just with my friend recently, like 30 minutes ago. We were talking about St. Robert Bellarmine, De Ecclesia, chapter 9, where Robert Bellarmine talks about the necessity for admonishing a pope under suspicion of heresy or incorrigible tyranny. St. Robert Bellarmine, not Father Jesusmary, not the Dubia Cardinals, not Taylor Marshall or anyone on a podcast. St. Robert Bellarmine says this. Let the process begin, is what I say as a Catholic, as a disciple of St. Robert Bellarmine. If a pope is suspect of heresy or incorrigible tyranny, there must be admonition, and if the pope is found to be that way and is unpenitent, there must be an investigation, a declaration that such a man has lost the papacy ipso facto. That's the hypothetical situation that St. Robert Bellarmine lays out. So here goes Father Jesusmary. Number one, on the 19th of March, 2016, says Father Jesusmary, on the subject of remarried divorcees, you stated that, quote, in such situations, many people, knowing and accepting the possibility of living as brothers and sisters, which the Church offers them, point out that in certain expressions of intimacy are lacking. It often happens that faithfulness is endangered and the good of the children suffers, end quote, Amoris Laetitia, note 329. I always remember that note because I was born March 29th, 329, so it's easy for me to remember the footnote. Footnote 329, Amoris. The idea here is if you're not validly married, the Church calls you to live as brother and sister. But then Pope Francis says, well, there's not certain expressions of intimacy, it's lacking. And for the sake of the children, that couple must have relations. I don't see that logic in St. Alphonsus Liguori or St. Thomas Aquinas, the great moral theologians. I don't see that. But for Francis, that's his new remix. Father Jesusmary goes on the 5th of September 2016, with the bishops of the pastoral region of Buenos Aires, you affirmed, quote, the commitment to live in continence can be proposed. Amoris Laetitia does not ignore the difficulties of this option. The mentioned option may not, in fact, be feasible. So he's saying here, the grace of God given to people in baptism and confirmation may not be enough for a man and a woman not to have sexual relationships which are not ratified by holy matrimony. And even the language in which he uses here, Francis, is the commitment to live in continence can be proposed. Previously, that was the discipline of the Church. You know, it's not the 10 proposals on Mount Sinai with Moses. It's the 10 commandments. That's what I was taught. Was that what y'all were taught? Father Jesusmary goes on. On the 5th of June, 2017, you ordered that these 3 sentences be published as Magisterium Authenticum in the Acta Apostolicae Sedis 108, pages 1071 to 1074. Father Jesusmary doing his homework. Facts, footnotes, citations. Now here's where Father Jesusmary says you have fallen into 3 heresies. This is going to begin a whole stream, a litany of heresies. Here's where Father Jesusmary says, you have fallen into 3 heresies. First, rejection of the universality of the 6th commandment. The 6th commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery in the Catholic enumeration. Number 2, rejection of the absolute character of the 6th commandment, as listed in Exodus chapter 20, verse 15, also in the Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. And rejection of the resolution to struggle to avoid sin, which is absolutely necessary condition for receiving the sacrament of confession, citation, Council of Trent, Doctrine on Penance, 14th session, 25th of November, 1551. And then he lists even more, a whole paragraph of citations, saying that we are called as Christians to avoid adultery, avoid fornication. And if we do commit those sins, it is absolutely necessary condition that we have an act of the will to avoid the occasion of sin, to avoid repeating the sin, in order to receive sacramental absolution within the sacrament of penance, to be reconciled to God. Council of Trent, very clear on that. And he says, these are 3 heresies relating to what you have taught in Amoris Laetitia. Then he goes on. On December 10th, 2018, together with Cardinal Luis Francisco Laderia Ferrer, Jesuit, and Archbishop Giacomo Morandi, Secretary, you authorize hysterectomy, removal of the uterus, on the pretext of the agreement of medical experts who would ensure that no future pregnancy could come to term. Since when has a pope accepted such a practice? Never. As the state of the uterus poses no present or future danger to the woman's health, you have allowed direct sterilization, an intrinsically moral evil act. So let me pause here. Hysterectomy in the case of cancer, illness, infection, other such problems is not morally wrong. It's permitted by the Church. What is not removal of the sexual organs. That's not allowed because it's a sterilization. All right, so there's a distinction there on the intent for the removal of the uterus in a hysterectomy. Father Jesusmary saying here that Pope Francis on December 10th, 2018 authorized hysterectomy on the pretext of the agreement of medical experts who would ensure that no future pregnancy should come to term. So it's a voluntary hysterectomy, not a medically required hysterectomy. He then said, as the state of the uterus poses no present or future danger to a woman's health, you have allowed direct sterilization, an intrinsically moral evil, Humanae Vitae 14, document of the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, 31st of July, 1993. Now taught in Catholic universities and practiced in Catholic hospitals. It is also the first antinatalist measure of the Catholic Church and the first error of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. You have fallen into heresy, a rejection of the divine law of procreation, Genesis 1:28, Genesis 38, verses 9 through 10. Father Jesusmary goes on. On February 4th, 2019, the United Arab Emirates, you and Ahmed El Tayyib, Imam of Al-Azhar, signed a declaration on human brotherhood containing the following sentence. The pluralism and diversity of religions, color, gender, race, and language are a wise divine will by which God created human beings. This sentence confuses God's permission with God's will. To say that God has permitted the existence of a diversity of religions is true because God respects human freedom, even when it errs in creating a religion that is not the one God intended. However, it is not true, says Father, to say that God has willed that there should be a diversity of religions. All right, this is the permissive and active will. God actively wills for no one to be murdered, for there to be no adultery, for there to be no lies, for there to be no theft. But he allows or permits those actions because of the freedom of will that he gives to his created humans. But by Pope Francis, and I've covered this before on the podcast, by him saying that, for example, the different languages, gender, male, female, race, that God actively wills all those things, which we agree, and then throws in there the diversity of religions, God does not actively will Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. He wills for everyone to know him through Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. John 14:6. Father Jesusmary goes on, in fact, some religions practice evil, for example, idolatry or sacred prostitution, but God cannot will evil. Since when has a pope made such a statement? Never. You have thus accepted a religious relativism that puts all religions on the same level and denies the specificity of Christianity as the supreme religion willed by God. There is no salvation apart from Jesus Christ. This is why you have taken part in the idolatry of 3 pagan ceremonies. The 4th of October with the 2019 with Pachamama, the 25th and 27th, July 2022, with the Autochtones, the Native Americans of Canada, and intrinsically in a morally evil act. You have fallen into 2 heresies, rejection of the goodness of God's will and rejection of the uniqueness of Christ's saving mission. See John 14:6 and Dominus Jesus 13. Father Jesusmary goes on. On the 21st of October 2020, in the international documentary Francesco, available on the Discovery Channel from the 28th of March 2021, you publicly called for homosexual civil cohabitation laws, saying, quote, "What we have to do is civil coexistence law. They have the right to be covered legally. I defend this," end quote. You have agreed to this documentary being made by your friend Evgeny Afanevsky, a militant homosexual who in 2009 made a film promoting homosexuality called "Oh Vey, My Son is Gay." On September 2021, the 5th of February 2023, and the 10th and 11th of March 2023, you called for these same laws on the pretext of legal sharing of socio-economic benefits. Since when has a pope acted this way? Asked Father Jesusmary. Asking humanity to adopt homosexual cohabitation laws? Never. You have committed the most publicized papal error in a gravely immoral act, according to the document on the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, published the 3rd of June 2003, by authorizing an intrinsically evil sexual cohabitation, says Father Jesusmary. He goes on to say, in fact, you have eliminated 3 important aspects concerning homosexuals. The first is the distinction between cohabitation laws and protection laws. Cohabitation laws are linked with the LMNOP LGBT ideology, while protection laws are linked to human discrimination. There are protection laws for children, women, the disabled, migrants, prisoners, and so on. All these people are entitled to consideration and humane treatment, which does not require sexual cohabitation laws. The second aspect is that these people have recourse to the common law to protect legal situations of mutual interests, which does not require sexual cohabitation laws. The third aspect, says Father, is the moral principle of avoiding close occasions for sin and keeping them far away. He quotes here Ecclesiastes 22, Matthew 5:29, Mark 9:43, Catechism of the Catholic Church, and cites the moral theologian Tanqueray on the spiritual life with over a dozen citations. So you see, in the Catholic theology, you can't have laws of cohabitation for sin. And even beyond that, Catholic moral theology says that you are to avoid occasions of sin. Living with someone who is a temptation for you to commit a sin is an occasion of sin. Then he says, you have fallen into two more heresies. Rejection of the divine law of marriage between a man and a woman, as in Genesis. Rejection of the resolution to avoid occasion of sin, which is absolutely necessary condition for receiving the sacrament of penance. Citation, Catechism of St. Pius X. On the 15th of September 2021, on the pretext that communion is not a prize for the perfect, in a press conference from a return trip to Slovakia, you authorized all public pro-abortion politicians to receive the Holy Eucharist without the need for them to reject their attachment to abortion. The A word. Since when has a pope given such an authorization? Never. You have thus allowed certain Catholics to receive Holy Eucharist without repenting of their serious sins and have failed in your duty as pastor to form the conscience of Christians to the moral good. Then he says, you have fallen into two more heresies. Rejection of the necessity of sacrament of penance for access to the Eucharist. Rejection of the moral gravity of the A word, an intrinsically and morally evil act. Having completed this reminder, says Father Jesusmary, I humbly and respectfully make the following accusations before the College of Bishops and every bishop, the College of Cardinals and every cardinal, the Episcopal conferences of every country, the Supreme Tribunal of the Apostolic Signatura, the Tribunal of the Roman Rota, the Dicastery for Bishops, and the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith. I accuse, says Father Jesusmary, I accuse Pope Francis, Cardinal Luis Francisco Ladera Ferrer, Archbishop Giacomo Morandi, of having caused the first error of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith by authorizing direct sterilization by hysterectomy. I accuse Pope Francis of failing to recognize that certain acts such as adultery, sterilization, idolatry, homosexuality, and abortion are intrinsically evil and can never be morally acceptable because of extenuating circumstances or because they contain positive elements. He cites here St. Thomas Aquinas. Father Jesusmary says, I accuse Pope Francis of having changed Christian morality and doctrine through relativism, moral, sexual, and religious, and situation ethics of having fallen into the heresies mentioned above. He goes on to say, I accuse Pope Francis of wanting to continue this in-depth change with the next Synod of Synodality, scheduled for October 2023 and 2024, having given the right to vote to several participants in favor of contraception, fornication, adultery, in vitro fertilization, abortion, homosexual cohabitation laws, blessing of homosexual couples, euthanasia, marriage of priests, and priestly ordination of women. How else can we understand why the eminent Cardinal Robert Sarah, currently the best-known African bishop who worked for many years in the Vatican, is opposed to relativism and situation ethics? He was not invited to the Synod? A recognized expert in moral theology from Africa was not invited. But all these other guys who are James Martin, Jesuit, Bergoglio adjacent, they got first-class tickets to the Synod. They got the fast pass. Father Jesusmary then he just throws down here. I mean, dropping bombs here. He's going to go ahead and just accuse about 30 men of heresy here in the church. He says, I accuse finally the following cardinals, bishops, and priests of having, like Pope Francis, a mentality that accepts relativism, situation ethic, and of having fallen into one or more heresies. Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State, Walter Casper, Francisco Coco Pomerio, Lorenzo Baldessari, Cardinal Schönborn, Agostino Vellini, Luis Francisco Laderia Ferrer, Matteo Maria Zuppi, Marcellus Samaro, Blaise Supich of Chicago, Reinhard Marx, Germany, Oscar Maradiaga, Gerd Batzing, Helmut Dieser, Dieter Geerlings, Franz Joseph Bode, goes on and on. We find some Wilton Gregory of D.C., Robert McElroy, San Diego. Going through here. Peter Turkson, who I think has a high chance of becoming the next pope. Me personally saying that. Going through here. There's a lot of names, over 30 names. I'm looking for American names or names you might know. Timothy Radcliffe of the Dominicans. Arturo Sosa, leader of the Jesuits. James Martin. And so on and so forth. In making these accusations, says Father Jesusmary, I'm aware that I am exposing myself to sanctions from the Vatican, and I am voluntarily exposing myself to these sanctions. In fact, these sanctions would be unjust and would constitute an abuse of power by the Vatican to silence the truth. I'm obliged to publish the truth to all the Catholic faithful, 1.3 billion, that have a right to know. I'm obliged to obey the 8th commandment of the Decalogue by avoiding the sin of adulation. As for the people I accuse, I do not know them. I have never seen them. I have no grudge or hatred against them. And the action I am taking here is merely a public means of hastening the explosion of truth and justice. Indeed, if the Vatican justice is truly just, it is the accused persons who should be punished in accordance with canon law. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more is of the evil one. If the accused refuse the accusation, let them agree to answer publicly yes or no to the following 5 questions. Number 1, is it morally right to affirm the commitment to live in continence is an option? Number 2, is it morally right to perform a hysterectomy when the condition of the uterus poses no present or future danger to the woman's health? Number 3, is it morally right for a Christian, a priest, a bishop, or a pope to take the initiative of calling for SSA, unnatural cohabitation laws? Number 4, is it morally right for a Christian to take part in pagan rites? Number 5, is it morally right to give the sacrament of the Eucharist to all publicly pro-abortion politicians who do not renounce that sin? Obviously, says Father Jesusmary, the answer to these 5 questions is no. And I, Taylor Marshall, would add that H to the no. No way. Father Jesusmary says all faithful Catholics know this. Even the last baptized person with a minimum of Orthodox Christian training knows it. Even non-Catholics with a minimum knowledge of natural moral law and Catholic teaching know that the answer to these 5 questions is no. Father Jesusmary closes up here. I have only one passion, the love of Jesus and Mary, of the Church, of the Pope, and of humanity. My fiery protest is simply the cry of my soul. Let them dare bring me before a canonical tribunal, and let the judgment take place in broad daylight. I am waiting. Please accept, dear Father, the assurance of my profound respect and my daily prayers that you will finally agree to respond to the dubias of Cardinals Walter Braunmüller, Raymond Leo Burke, Cardinal Caffarra, and Joachim Meissner. May they rest in peace. As well as to the 5 questions I have just asked. Signed, July 16th, Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, Father Jesusmary Missigbètò. Boom shakalaka. End quote. What do you guys think of the open letter of accusation of Father Jesusmary Missigbètò to Pope Francis and over 30 clerics? And then the challenge of these 5 questions to bring it all out into daylight. We, the Catholics, the baptized, the confirmed, the ordained, we must ask these questions, and as Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. No more games. No more Jesuitical trickery. And I say that with the greatest respect to St. Ignatius Loyola and the Jesuits, the true Jesuits, the real Jesuits, not the men who have infiltrated the Jesuits and taken over one of the greatest orders of all time. We need boldness, and I would appeal. I know bishops watch this channel because bishops tell me they watch this channel. I know cardinals watch this channel because cardinals tell me they watch this channel. I appeal to you, dear fathers in Christ. Let your voice be even louder. Let your voice be even more refined and precise than Father Jesusmary Missigbètò. He's putting it all on the line. We need cardinals who stand up and do what Robert Bellarmine said needs to be done if a pope is suspect of heresy or incorrigible tyranny. It is the duty of those men, especially those men who wear red cassocks signifying the blood of martyrdom, to stand up and ask the Pope the questions and admonish him to give him these questions and expose it. Bring it all in the light. Robert Bellarmine, Cardinal Newman, Cardinal Manning have said, maybe they're wrong, but they said, a pope who is a manifest heretic ipso facto loses the papacy. Is that true? I tend to trust those men. But if it is true, we got to have some clarity about it. We can't just walk down the street kicking rocks and kicking cans and hoping it's going to all get better. We're not quietists. We're not Quakers. Robert Bellarmine set down the path. Let's go down the path. Remember, our Lord Jesus Christ says, you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. Like this video. Share this podcast. Give it a 5-star review if you listen on like iTunes or Spotify. Subscribe if you're new. Pray your rosary every day. 99% of the people that listen to this are not a cardinal, not a bishop, not a pope. Maybe Pope Francis is watching. Pope Francis, answer these questions, please, for the love of God. But y'all out there can pray your rosary every single blessed day. It's the bare minimum. It's like, as a human, you have to brush your teeth every day. It's just like bare human behavior. Like you just got praying your rosary as a Catholic every day. Bare minimum. Get on it. Do it. Read your Bible every day. Find a good traditional parish liturgy, traditional Latin Mass, Eastern. Get locked in. Thanks for watching. God bless. Godspeed. God bless you. Praying for you, Father Jesusmary.